A very good evening to one and all present over here. I am Ritesh Kumar Sinha, the Android facilitator from Developer Student Club CV Raman Global University, and I welcome you all in the final session of Android Study Jam presented by the collaboration of DSC CVRGU and DSC Geeta. So, in today's session, we are going to know about activity lifecycle, fragment lifecycle, room library, glide, and Picasso. Trust me, guys, these are the most important topic of entire Android. And once you have a tight grip on these concepts, you are going to achieve everything in Android. So, coming to the activity lifecycle concept. To navigate transitions between stages of the activity lifecycle, the activity class provides a core set of six callbacks like onCreate method, onStart method, onResume method, onPause method, onStop method, and onDestroy method. The system invokes each of these callbacks as an activity enters a new state. As the user begins to leave the activity, the system calls method to dismantle the activity. However, in some cases, this dismantlement is only partial, which means that the activity still resides in the memory and still come back to the foreground. If the user returns to that activity, the activity resumes from where the user left off. With a few exceptions, apps are restricted from starting activities were running in the background. The system likely of killing a given process along with the activities in it depends on the state of the activity at that time. Activity state and ejection from memory provides more information on the relationship between the state and the vulnerability to ejections. So the several methods in the activity life cycles are onCreate method. In onCreate method, you perform basic application startup logic that should happen only once for entire life of an activity. In the onStart method, the onStart call makes the activity visible to user as the app prepares for the activity to enter the foreground and become interactive. In the onResume methods, when an activity enters resumed state, it comes to foreground and system invokes onResume method. In the onPause method, the system calls onPause method as a first indication that user is leaving your activity. In the onStop method, when your activity is no longer visible to the users in the system invokes the onStop method. In the onDestroy method is called before the activity is destroyed. Now, coming to the fragment lifecycle in Android. Each fragment instance has its own lifecycle. When a user navigates and interacts with your app, your fragment transitions through various states in the lifecycle as they are added, removed, and entered or exit on the screen. To manage lifecycle, fragment implements lifecycle owner, exposing a lifecycle object that you can access through a get lifecycle method. Each possible lifecycle state is represented in the lifecycle.state enum like initialized, created, started, resumed, and destroyed. So, by building a fragment on the top of lifecycle, you can use the techniques and classes available for handling life cycles with lifecycle aware components. For example, you might display the device location on the screen using a lifecycle aware component. The component could automatically start listening when the fragments become active and stops when the fragments move in an inactive state. As an alternative to using a lifecycle observer, the fragment class includes callback methods that corresponds to each of the changes in a fragment lifecycle. These includes onCreate, onStart, onResume, onPause, onStop, and onDestroy method. A fragment view has a separate lifecycle that is managed independently from that of a fragment lifecycle. Fragment maintains a lifecycle owner for their views which can be accessed using getViewLifecycleOwner or getViewLifecycleOwner live data method. Having access to the views lifecycle is useful for situations where a lifecycle aware component should only perform work with while a fragment view exists, such as observing live data that is only meant to be displayed on the screen. So, as a fragment progresses through a life cycle, it moves upward and downward through its states. For example, a fragment that is added to the top of a backstack moves upward from created to started to resumed. Conversely, when a fragment is popped off the backstack, it moves downward through those states, going from resumed to started to created and finally destroyed. Now coming to the Room library in Android. A Room is a persistence library provides an abstraction layer over SQLite to allow fluent database access while harnessing the full power of SQLite. To execute Room library, you should follow some of the steps like first of all you should update the gradle.build file for dependency where you add the dependency for Room. So the Room dependencies are available via Google's new Maven repository and you should add it in the project level build.gradle file. Next, you should create entity class. Room creates a table for each class annotated with @entity. The field in the class corresponds to columns in the table. Therefore, the entity classes tend to be small model classes that don't contain any logics. The next step is to create a DAO class. DAO are responsible for defining the methods that access the database. In the initial SQLite implementation of your project, all the queries to be database were done in the local user data source file where we were working with cursor objects. With Room, we don't need all the cursor related codes and can simply define our queries using annotation in the user DAO class. The next step is to create the database. So we need to define an abstract class that extends Room database. This class is annotated with @database, lists the entities contained in the database and the DAO which access them. Next is Glide. Glide is an image processing library developed by Myung Min. So using Glide, we can show the images, decode the image, Kake image, animated GIFs, and many more things. Now coming to Picasso. Android Picasso is an image loading processing library developed and maintained by Square Incorporation. It is immensely popular since it often requires just one line of code and has a similar styling of coding for each of its features. So that is all from my part. Now I request Aman to carry on.
Thank you so much, Ritesh. And good evening, everyone. This is Aman Raj, Android Facilitator at DSC Kita, welcoming you all to this final session of Android Study Jams presented by the collaboration of Developer Student Club Kita and Developer Student Club CVRGU. So, let's start today's session. In this session, we will focus on navigation and view model. We will learn about the navigation components and why to use view model. So let's start with the navigation and its component first. Navigation refers to the interactions that allow users to navigate across into and back out from the different pieces of content within your app. Android Jetpack's navigation component helps you to implement navigation from simple button clicks to more complex patterns such as app bars and the navigation drawer. The navigation component consists of three key parts: navigation graph, nav host, and nav controller. Navigation graph is an XML resource that contains all navigation related information in one centralized location. This includes all the individual content areas within your app called destination, as well as the possible paths that a user can take through your app. Navigation occurs between your app's destination, that is anywhere in your app to which users can navigate. These destinations are connected via connections. The navigation graph is a resource file that contains all of your destinations and actions. The graph represents all of your app's navigation path. The figure here shows a visual representation of a navigation graph for a sample app containing 6 destinations connected by 5 actions. Each destination is represented by a preview thumbnail, and connecting actions are represented by arrows that show how users can navigate from one destination to another. Navhost is an empty container that displays destinations from your navigation graph. The navigation component contains a default Navhost implementation Navhost fragment that displays fragment destinations. Let's see how we can add a Navhost to an activity. One of the core parts of the navigation component is the navigation host. The navigation host is an empty container where destinations are swapped in and out as a user navigates through your app. The navigation component is designed for apps that have one main activity with multiple fragment destinations. The main activity is associated with a navigation graph and contains a nav host fragment. That is responsible for swapping destinations as needed. In an app with multiple activity destinations, each activity has its own navigation graph. The XML example here shows a nav host fragment as part of an app's main activity. Note the following in this example. The name attribute contains the class name of your nav host implement. Like you can see that androidx.navigation.fragment.navhost fragment. The navgraph attribute associates the navhost fragment with a navigation graph. The navigation graph specifies all of the destinations in this navhost fragment to which users can navigate. The default navhost attribute ensures that your navhost fragment intercepts the system back button. The nav controller is an object that manages app navigation within a nav host. The nav controller orchestrates the swapping of destination content in the nav host as users move throughout your app. As you navigate through your app, you tell the nav controller that you want to navigate either along a specific path in your navigation graph or directly to a specific destination. The nav controller then shows the appropriate destination in the nav host. Adding destinations to the navigation graph is easy. You can create a destination from an existing fragment or activity. You can also use the navigation editor to create a new destination or create a placeholder to later replace with a fragment or activity. In this example, let's create a new destination to add a new destination using the navigation editor. To do the following, in the navigation editor, click the new destination icon and then click create new destination. So that will create a new destination in the navigation graph. The start destination is the first screen users see when opening your app, and it's the last screen users see when exiting your app. The navigation editor uses a house icon to indicate the start destination. Once you have all your destinations in place, you can choose a start destination by doing the following. In the Design tab, click on the destination to highlight it. Click the Assign Start Destination button. Alternatively, you can right-click on the destination and click Set a Start Destination. Let's see how we can connect destinations. An action is a logical connection between destinations. Actions are represented in the navigation graphs as arrows. Actions usually connect one destination to another through, though you can also create global actions that make you to a specific destination from anywhere in your app. With actions, you are representing the different paths that users can take through your app. You can use the navigation editor to connect two destinations by doing the following. In the Design tab, hover over the right side of the destination that you want users to navigate from. A circle appears over the right side of the destination as shown in the first figure. Click and drag your cursor over the destination you want users to navigate to and release. The resulting line between the two destinations represents an action as shown in the second figure. Now it's time for the view model. The view model class is designed to store and manage UI related data in a lifecycle conscious way. The view model class allows data to survive configuration changes such as screen rotations. The Android framework manages the life cycles of UI controllers such as activities and fragments. The framework may decide to destroy or recreate a UI controller in response to certain user actions or device events that are completely out of your control. If the system destroys or recreates a UI controller, any transient UI related data you stored in them is lost. For example, your app may include a list of users in one of its activities. When the activity is recreated or a configuration change, the new activity has to refetch the list of users. For simple data, the activity can use the onSaved instance state method and restore its data from the bundle in onCreate method. But this approach is only suitable for small amounts of data that can be serialized then deserialized, not for potentially large amounts of data like a list of users or bitmaps. Another problem is that UI controllers frequently need to make asynchronous calls that may take some time to return. The UI controller needs to manage these calls and ensure the system them cleans them up after it's destroyed to avoid potential memory leaks. This management requires a lot of maintenance, and in this case, where the object is recreated for a configuration change, it's a waste of resources since the object may have to reissue calls it has already made. UI controllers such as activities and fragments are primarily intended to display UI data, react to user actions, or handle operating system communication, such as permission requests. Requiring UI controllers to also be responsible for loading data from a database or network adds bloat to the class. Assigning excessive responsibility to UI controllers can result in a single class that tries to handle all of an app's work by itself, instead of delegating work to other classes. Assigning excessive responsibility to the UI controllers in this way also makes testing a lot harder. It's easier and more efficient to separate out view data ownership from UI controller logic. If the activity is recreated, it receives the same view model instance that was created by the first activity when the owner activity is finished. The framework calls the view model objects on cleared method so that it can clean up resources. There is a caution which you have to take, like a view model must never reference a view lifecycle or any class that may hold a reference to the activity context. View model objects are designed to outlive specific instantiations of views or lifecycle owners. The design also means you can write tests to cover a view model more easily as it doesn't know about view and lifecycle objects. View model objects can contain lifecycle observers such as live data objects. However, view model objects must never observe changes to lifecycle aware observables such as live data objects. If the view model needs the application context, for example, to find a system service, it can extend the Android view model class and have a constructor that receives the application in the constructor, since application class extends context. The lifecycle of a view model. View model objects are scoped to the lifecycle passed to the view model provider when getting the view model. The view model remains in memory until the lifecycle it's scoped to go away permanently. In the case of an activity, when it finishes, while in the case of a fragment when it's detached. The figure illustrates the various life cycle states of an activity as it undergoes a rotation and then is finished. The illustration also shows the lifetime of the view model next to the associated activity life cycle. This particular diagram illustrates the state of an activity. The same basic states apply to the life cycle of a fragment. You usually request a view model the first time the system calls an activity object's onCreate method. The system may call onCreate several times throughout the life of an activity, such as when a device screen is rotated multiple times. The view model exists from when you first request a view model until the activity is finished and then destroyed. And that's it. We are done with this session. And I thank all of you for being with us in this wonderful journey of Android Study Jams. See you soon.